He paused, letting his words sink in. Oh, and by the way, Maggie, I'm dying. 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. The doctors gave me 6 months to a year, but I decided to take control of how it ends. And just so you know, before you start celebrating, I changed my will after my heart attack. You're getting nothing. Zero, zilch, nada. After tonight, a young man will hand you something that explains everything. Can't we talk this out? She asked, her voice cracking. No, Maggie, I spent 2 years trying to talk to you, and you made it crystal clear how you felt about me. Now it's your turn to pay. Hell, you probably didn't even notice I haven't worn my wedding ring in months, did you? You spent $2,000 on it, and I pawned it for $20. Maybe if you hurry, you can get it back before they sell it. You did what? Maggie cried. That ring was special. I had it made just for you. Yeah, didn't seem like you cared about it or me for the last 10 years. Definitely not in the last 2. I don't even remember the last time you told me you loved me. You made it perfectly clear I wasn't good enough for you anymore. I could have accepted a divorce, but no, you had to degrade me at every opportunity. Alan, let's get help. Counseling, something. Please don't do this, she begged, her voice shaking. Help? Alan said mockingly. Now you care? Now that I'm actually dying? Too late, Maggie. I warned you this wouldn't end well, but you didn't listen. Oh, and by the way, you might want to prepare yourself for the flood of calls you're about to get. You see, this is all being recorded and will be sent to everyone you know, your friends, family, coworkers, even some media outlets. No, please, she cried. Let's start over. I've learned my lesson. Please, Alan, I'll change. Too little, too late, Maggie. Goodbye, Alan said. Without hesitation, Alan placed the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. The top of his head exploded, sending blood and brain matter everywhere. Maggie screamed hysterically, collapsing to her knees. No, Alan, please, don't die. Come back to me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. I really do love you, she wailed, over and over, her sobs echoing into the night. I stopped the recording, saved it, and opened the email draft on Alan's phone. I attached the video, hit send, and waited until I saw the confirmation that the email had been sent. Then I turned off the phone and stared into the silence that followed. As I approached the hysterical woman, she looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I pulled the envelope labeled Mags from my pocket and handed it to her. Who are you? She asked between sobs. From what Alan told me, I'm the closest thing to a son he ever had. It's a shame. I think he would have been a great father, I replied. Good luck, I added before turning and walking away as quickly as possible. Although I appeared calm on the outside, I was trembling for a long time afterward. I had just witnessed one man being killed and another taking his own life in a horrifying manner. It took me a while to compose myself enough to make a few calls. The first was to my friends, letting them know I needed to leave early the next morning. They were understanding, but asked if I was okay. I promised to explain everything at a later time. The second call was to the lawyer whose number was on the card in the envelope Alan had given me. I introduced myself, and we spoke briefly. He told me to visit his Washington, D.C. office within the next couple of days and provided directions to the bank where I was to deposit Alan's phone in a safe deposit box. Turn on the news, he instructed before ending the call. When I did, I saw a condensed, edited version of the video I had sent. The story was already making headlines. The suicide of a well-connected figure in Washington's political sphere was deemed newsworthy. The broadcast reported that attempts to contact Alan Jacobs's widow had been unsuccessful. According to the videos sent to multiple media outlets, the tragedy appeared to stem from an ongoing affair she allegedly had with a foreign diplomat. The anchor noted it was unclear how Alan had managed to send out the footage of his suicide, but suggested he likely had assistance. The State Department had yet to issue a statement regarding the diplomat's murder. Stay tuned for updates, the anchor concluded. I flipped through channels, finding coverage of Alan's death everywhere. When I opened my laptop, I discovered that the news had gone viral. Articles reported that 3 videos had been shared, but only parts of one were deemed suitable for broadcast. The other 2, they said, were explicit, showing Mrs. Jacobs engaged in sexual acts with the diplomat. The next day, I returned to the United States and went straight to the lawyer's office. He informed me that Alan had updated his will some time ago, naming me the sole beneficiary of his estate, except for his house, which he had left to a nonprofit organization to use as a shelter for homeless veterans. After taxes and other expenses, the lawyer said I would inherit about $10. Millions? The reading of Alan's will was much the same. Maggie attempted to contest the will, but withdrew her objection when the lawyer mentioned that some of the more incriminating videos of her affair could be used against her and would likely become part of the public record. After the meeting, she approached me. "I hope you're happy. I've lost everything," she said bitterly. I stared at her, incredulous. "You didn't lose anything. You threw it all away. To be precise, you destroyed it. Now you're getting exactly what you deserve." I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there. Back at school, I felt more motivated than ever to succeed. I wanted to be the kind of man who would make both Alan and my father proud. At the same time, I kept tabs on Maggie. A few months later, she appeared on a daytime talk show, trying to paint herself as the victim. 3 of the hosts sympathized, but one had clearly seen all 3 videos and began confronting her, albeit politely. The host brought up Maggie's own words from the footage. Maggie denied saying them, but the host played the recording, where she admitted Alan had never abused or cheated on her. The host then asked, "Isn't it true you refused to call 911 while your husband was having a heart attack? From what I understand, you and your lover continued your activities while he was dying. How do you respond to that?" The interview ended abruptly as Maggie left the set in tears. To my knowledge, she never appeared on television again. Months later, an article reported that Maggie had been found dead in her apartment, the apparent victim of suicide. She had been placed on administrative leave after Alan's death, and investigations revealed that the diplomat she had been involved with was linked to ISIS. Intelligence agencies suspected Maggie had leaked sensitive information. Unable to cope with the fallout of her own actions, she overdosed on pills and alcohol. Officers discovered her body dressed in her wedding gown, clutching her wedding photo to her chest. A note on her nightstand read simply, "Please forgive me." I took Alan's advice regarding relationships. I dated many women, fulfilled my goals, and moved on. Although I fell in love once or twice, my feelings always changed after meeting their families. Then I met Karen. We dated for quite a while, and over time, I found myself falling deeply in love with her. She invited me to spend the holidays with her family, and I was immediately struck by the way her parents interacted. Despite being married for 30 years, they behaved like teenagers, sneaking hugs and kisses at every opportunity. Their love for one another was obvious. Karen teased them more than once, saying they should get a room, to which her mother laughed and replied, "How do you think you got here?" By the end of the trip, my decision was clear. Before we left, Karen's father pulled me aside for a private conversation. "You seem like a great guy, George," he said. "I can see how my daughter looks at you, so tell me the truth. Do you love her? I mean, really love her?" "Yes, sir, I do," I answered honestly. It was true. I loved Karen deeply. "Do you love her enough to spend the rest of your life with her?" he asked, cutting straight to the point. That was the million-dollar question. "I believe I do," I replied. "Good," he said firmly, "because if you ever hurt my little girl, you'll have me to answer to." I paused, carefully considering my response. I knew he was just looking out for his daughter, and I respected that. Sir, I've seen firsthand what happens when a marriage falls apart. I've personally witnessed the pain it can cause. I swear to you, I would never do anything to hurt her. One day I'll tell you my story, and I hope you'll understand. I wasn't sure if it was the look in my eyes or the tear threatening to fall, but he seemed to believe me. He nodded and said, "Okay, George, that's good enough for now, but I'm going to hold you to it." Karen and I married after I graduated from law school. At her father's insistence, we signed a prenuptial agreement to protect both our assets. In addition to my $10 million inheritance, Karen had received a substantial amount from her grandparents. We all agreed it was the smartest thing to do. Her family seemed puzzled when I announced my decision to join the Marines and become a JAG officer, a military attorney. They had assumed I would accept one of the lucrative offers from the prestigious law firms that had tried to recruit me. That's when I told them about my father and Alan. "Oh my God, that's so sad," Karen said when she heard the story. I showed them the video I recorded that night in Sewell. Although Alan's phone remained in storage, I was one of the over 1,000 recipients of the email he sent out. "You took that video?" Karen asked, surprised. "I always wondered how it got to the media so fast. Didn't anyone ever question you?" "No," I replied. "I guess the authorities figured it didn't matter much, and with Mrs. Jacobs gone, the case is closed. I have other videos that Alan recorded, but they're not for the faint of heart." I looked at Karen's father and said, "Now you know why I'll never do anything to hurt your daughter, and if any problems arise, I'll handle them before they spiral out of control." He nodded, pulling me into a firm hug. "I believe you, son. Thanks for sharing that with us. It must have been hard to witness." About a year later, Karen and I welcomed our first child, a boy. When she asked what I wanted to name him, I immediately replied, "Michael. Alan Richardson, after the two bravest men I've ever known." Michael was my father's first name, and Alan, of course, needed no explanation. "Michael Allen," she said, smiling. "I like it. Michael Allen it is." And now, here we are, standing in front of Alan's grave at Arlington National Cemetery. I know some people, upon hearing this story, might think Alan was weak for enduring the humiliation his wife put him through for so long. I've questioned it myself. Why did he stay? Maybe he held out hope that the love they once shared would triumph in the end. Maybe he thought she'd eventually come to her senses. Who knows? I've chosen not to judge him for his decisions. What I do know for certain is what I witnessed that day in Coel. That was not the act of a coward. I reached into my uniform pocket, pulled out a small eagle, globe, and anchor pin, and placed it on Alan's headstone. "Semper Fi, Alan. Rest in peace." So we've come to the end of today's story. Was this the ending you anticipated, or did it take a turn you didn't see coming? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share them in the comments below, and let's start a conversation. If this story kept you captivated, don't forget to hit the like button. And if you're new here or haven't subscribed yet, now is the perfect time to join our community. I bring fresh, engaging stories every day, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a post. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. What drives a man to his breaking point under the weight of pain and humiliation? If you asked 50 men, you'd likely receive 50 different answers. As I stood in front of the headstone of a man I barely knew, this question lingered in my mind. Our paths had crossed only briefly, but those fleeting hours left an indelible mark on my life. 7 years ago, during a break from college, I joined some friends on a trip to Sewell. They had promised an adventure packed with diving, partying, and meeting women, and they certainly delivered. The diving was breathtaking and the nights were wild. But one evening, seeking a quieter moment, I chose to enjoy a beer alone at a local bar. That's when he approached me. "Mind if I join you?" the older man asked. He looked to be in his 60s, maybe older, with a face etched by time and eyes that carried stories of hardship. Something about him struck a chord of familiarity, and feeling generous, I gestured for him to sit. A faint smile crossed his face as he extended his hand. "I'm Alan Jacobs," he introduced himself. I shook his hand and replied, "George Richardson." After we exchanged names, he sat down and said something that caught me off guard. "Yes, I know who you are." Confused, I asked, "How do you know me?" "It's nothing sinister," he assured me. "I knew your father. We served together in Vietnam many years ago. He even saved my life, along with several other Marines. He was awarded the Medal of Honor for it." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a worn photo, handing it to me with a bittersweet smile. I instantly recognized the picture. It had hung in my father's office when he was alive. Alan pointed to the men in the photograph, all in military uniforms. "Your dad's right here," he said, indicating one man in the picture. "And this guy? We called him Spider because he was so tall and skinny. But don't let his build fool you. He could hold his own in a fight." Alan paused, his gaze fixed on the image, as though lost in memories of old comrades. "Sadly, they're all gone now. Just me left." After a moment of silence, he looked back at me and asked, "So, do you have a fiancé? A girlfriend?" I shook my head. "Not at the moment. I'm focused on school, but I've been on a few dates here and there." He nodded approvingly. "Good for you." "Believe me, the last thing you want is to settle down with one woman right now. Chase them, have your fun, and then move on. Trust me." I chuckled. You sound like you're speaking from experience. Are you married?" Mm. He let out a bitter laugh. "Technically, yes," he replied, his tone dripping with disdain. "But it's all a joke now. Has been for years. I gave her everything. My best years, my loyalty, my love. And how did she repay me? By deceiving me, cutting me off, cheating on me, and humiliating me every chance she got." I thought to myself, this man is carrying a lot of resentment. "Want to hear the story?" he asked. My curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. "Sure," I said. He began recounting how he and his wife, Maggie, used to take spontaneous scuba diving trips to places like Mexico to escape the stress of their jobs. He described Maggie as both stunning and emotionally distant. Things changed 2 years ago when they were in Coel. A smooth-talking Spaniard entered their lives with the clear intent of seducing Maggie. "This guy," Alan said, anger flashing in his eyes, "had the audacity to tell me he was going to sleep with my wife and make me watch. Can you believe that? He even showed me the exact spot where it would happen, and detailed everything my wife would do to prepare for him." He paused, his voice trembling. "And the worst part? She went through with it, like they had rehearsed it all in advance. My cold, distant 46-year-old wife, who never wanted anything from me, was suddenly shaving on his command and going out without underwear, acting like some spring break teenager." He shook his head. "I should have stopped her, but I didn't. I thought she'd reject him like she always rejected me. But no, she went along with it. What could I do? He made it clear that if I didn't comply, he'd stick around and sleep with her day and night. He said if I watched just once, he'd leave us alone and go home. That was a lie. They deceived me. That night was only the beginning." Alan's voice grew heavier with anger. "After that, they took every chance to embarrass and demean me. I'll admit, at first, there was a strange, twisted thrill to it. I thought maybe she'd tire of him and come back to me. But that never happened. It quickly became a never-ending nightmare." "Why didn't you just leave her?" I asked. "End it and move on." He sighed deeply. 2 words. "No fault. Do you know what that means?" I shook my head. "It means she gets almost everything. The house, half our savings, half my retirement, and a chunk of my income. She'd live in the home I built, with my money, while I'd be stuck paying her bills. And she'd still be with her boyfriend. I spoke to several lawyers, and they all said the same thing. At my age, in my condition, I wouldn't survive on my own. I frowned. Your condition? Nodded grimly. A few months into this nightmare, I had a heart attack. It happened while they were in the middle of one of their sessions, one she forced me to watch. Can you believe they didn't even stop to help? She actually said, "If he dies, he dies. We'll just take his insurance money and travel the world." Then they laughed about it. His voice quavered as he added, "I somehow managed to crawl to the phone and call 911. As the paramedics arrived, neither my wife nor her lover paused what they were doing. Even worse, they disappeared completely during my hospital stay. I have no idea where they went. And not once did she visit or check on me. Not once. I suggested, what if you sought revenge, found someone else to humiliate her, and made her watch? He stopped me immediately. "No, son, that's not right," he explained. "I made a vow before God and everyone else to stay loyal to her until death do us part. Those vows still mean something to me, even if they don't mean a thing to her." But that moment was a turning point. I decided she wouldn't get another thing from me. I changed my will, removed her as the beneficiary on my insurance and retirement plans. Then, about 4 months ago, I was diagnosed with an inoperable brain tumor. The doctor said I have 6 months to a year left to live. That's when I decided enough was enough. No matter what happens, tonight is the night I take back my self-respect. I struggled to process what he was telling me. To prove his story, he pulled out his phone. "I know what you're thinking. This sounds impossible, like something out of a movie or a trashy story on the internet. You probably think no one with a conscience could act like this in real life," he said. I nodded in agreement. He tapped on his phone and handed it to me. "Watch this video and then tell me what you think," he said. I put on the earbuds and hit play. The screen showed a striking older woman straddling a man whose face was hidden by her body. Her eyes seemed to lock on the camera, but I realized she was looking at the man behind it. Her smile was cold, devoid of warmth. "Do you like what you see?" she teased, continuing her movements. "Your face says no, but I know better. You love watching me get filled, don't you? You might shake your head, but I can see the truth. Don't worry, you'll never touch me again." As she stood up, she exclaimed, "Wow, that was incredible! What's the matter? You look pale. Are you about to have another heart attack? Maybe this time it'll kill you. I'll play the grieving widow perfectly. I've had years of practice pretending to be a loving wife. Then I'll take your insurance money and we'll travel the world, indulging in endless intimacy." She laughed cruelly. The man in the video sat up, joined in her laughter, and wrapped an arm around her. She turned to him with a smirk. "Let's do it again, big guy." "Maybe we'll give him a stroke this time," she said playfully. The video ended with both of them laughing uncontrollably. My head spun as I stared at the blank screen. "I have many more videos like that," Alan said. "Why is she doing this?" "Did you cheat on her? Hurt her?" I asked. He shook his head firmly. "Never! I've been nothing but faithful, and I've treated her like a queen." He took the phone back and pulled up another video. "Here, watch this," he said. The second video showed his wife from behind as he confronted her. "Why are you doing this to me? To us?" his voice asked from off Cayman. "I've never cheated on you, and I've always treated you with love and respect. Please, help me understand why you're causing so much pain." She sighed heavily and turned to face him, irritation plain on her face. "Listen, you just don't do it for me anymore, okay? I know you've been faithful, and yes, you've provided for us financially, but I need someone else's attention. Yours just doesn't excite me like it used to. So please, just let me have this. We can still be together, and everything will be fine. Maybe in a few years, I'll get bored of him, and we can retire and laugh about all this when we're old. Just let me have this." She pleaded. "No, Mags, I won't. This isn't going to end well for either of us," Alan's voice insisted in the video. "Damn it," she snapped. "If you even think about divorce, I'll ruin you. I'll take everything, half the house, half the money, and I'll keep seeing him. And guess who will be left paying the bills? You got that?" The screen went dark, leaving me speechless. "How can someone be so heartless?" I asked. "You have enough evidence to destroy her." Alan grinned. "Now you're starting to understand," he said, leaning in with a sinister edge in his voice. "These videos can ruin her. And that's exactly what I plan to do. Tonight marks the beginning of her downfall. But I can't do it alone. I need your help, George." I hesitated, the weight of his words sinking in. "Why me?" I asked. "Surely you could find someone else." He nodded, seeming to expect my skepticism. "Of course I could. But you, George, are like a son to me." My wife refused to have kids, claiming they would hold back her career, so when I die, there will be no one to carry on my legacy. No descendants. Nothing. Just me. He paused, before adding, "And there's something else." Alan leaned forward. "Tell me, George, how many C students receive $1 million scholarship to an Ivy League school?" His question stopped me in my tracks. In high school, I'd been far from the perfect student, much to my parents' frustration. Yet somehow I was awarded a massive scholarship from a private foundation for families of Vietnam veterans. It covered everything: tuition, books, housing, and even gave me extra spending money with some restrictions. After earning that scholarship, I'd promised my mother I'd focus on my studies, and I'd kept that promise ever since. Alan continued, his voice heavy with emotion. "Your father and I stayed in touch after the war, writing letters and emails. I met your mother several times, even introduced you two, but you were just a baby then, so you wouldn't remember. When your father was in the hospital during his final days, I visited him. He asked me to ensure his family would be cared for. His illness had drained their finances, so I set up a private foundation to cover his medical bills. I also created a $1 million trust for your mother and a scholarship for you as a token of my gratitude to the man who saved my life." Alan's tone grew darker, but lately I've wondered if surviving that war was worth it. So tonight, on what could be my last night, I'm asking for your help, George. Will you join me in reclaiming some of my dignity and manhood? Alan looked at me intently and said, "This is my last wish as a dying man." His words weighed heavily as I took a moment to process them. "Isn't there another way?" I asked. "Couldn't we take legal action against her for emotional abuse or go after her job?" He shook his head with a resigned expression. "No, it's too late for that. I'm already a dead man walking. In a month, maybe less, I'll probably be back in the hospital for good this time. I won't spend my final days frail and alone, and I definitely won't let her control what happens when I'm gone." I couldn't help but feel skeptical. "Are you sure this will work?" I asked hesitantly. Alan smiled with quiet confidence. "I have the advantage of surprise. They expect me to be a broken, defeated old man. They won't see this storm coming." "You're not planning to hurt her, are you?" I asked cautiously. "No. I don't want her dead," he assured me. "I want her to suffer. She needs to live a long life and remember this as the lowest point of it all. She has to face the shame of what she's done to me, what she's done to us. Trust me, after tonight, she'll have a lot of explaining to do." What exactly do you need me to do?" I asked, hoping his request wouldn't involve anything dangerous. "Not much," he replied. "All you have to do is record the encounter, send it out, and hand her an envelope with the video inside. I've already drafted the email. All you'll need to do is attach the video and hit send. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes. The thicker one is for her, he explained. It contains everything she needs to know about what will happen tonight. The other one is for you. What's in mine? I asked, curious. There's a key to a safe deposit box, a card, and a letter with detailed instructions. After tonight, you'll need to call my lawyer. He's expecting your call and will explain everything. All right, I'll do it, I said. It seems simple enough. Record, send, and deliver an envelope. A faint smile spread across Alan's face. Thank you, George. This means a lot to me. Consider it my final act of rebellion, he said with a note of satisfaction. We finished our beers in silence, watching a soccer match on the bar's large screen. Then, Alan checked his watch and announced it was time to leave. I followed him out, uncertain where we were headed. He remained quiet for most of the walk, but eventually offered some advice. George, one day you'll meet someone and fall in love, he began. Despite what I said earlier about moving on quickly, love will find you, eventually. But before you get married, do yourself a favor. Observe her character closely. Watch how she treats her parents, because that's likely how she'll treat you. And always get a prenuptial agreement. Protect yourself. Don't let your relationship turn into mine. Always put her happiness first, love her fully, but take action at the first sign of trouble. His advice felt sound, even if it came from a place of pain. Eventually, we arrived at our destination. Sitting on the outdoor staircase was the woman from the video, accompanied by a tall man. In the dim light, it seemed like she might have been performing something intimate on him, but I couldn't be sure. Alan stopped and turned to me. "This is it," he said. "Showtime! You have my phone, so start recording when I approach them. Just a heads up, what you're about to see might be hard to watch." "Alan," I said, my voice softening, "I'm sorry for everything you've been through. I barely know you, but I can tell you would have made a great father." Alan smiled and placed a hand on my shoulder. "George, you're the spitting image of your dad. I know he'd be proud of you right now," he said, his voice filled with emotion. His words stirred something within me, reminding me of things my father used to say. Alan grinned slightly, and I put in my earbuds to monitor the sound. Adjusting his phone for the best angle, I zoomed in slightly to capture a clearer view of the scene. The couple noticed Alan approaching but didn't see me. The man straightened up, his face twisting into a smug grin. "Well, well, look who finally decided to show up," he said mockingly, eliciting a smile from the woman beside him. Alan remained composed, his tone firm. "I'm here, let's get this over with." "Not so fast," the man sneered, producing a bottle of champagne and 3 glasses. He poured drinks for himself and the woman before offering one to Alan. "Let's make a toast before we begin, shall we? After all, it's a special occasion. 2 years since I met your wife, right here on these very steps." Alan kept his hands at his sides, his face impassive. "Come on now, Alan," the woman chimed in. "Don't be such a buzzkill. This is a big day for all of us, isn't it? Don't you want to celebrate? Maybe even reenact that first night? I'm wearing the same dress, you know. Don't you like it?" Her tone grew more taunting. "We can toast, and then you can watch him, just like you did before. I'm already dripping with anticipation. And after, you can sit and watch us all night. Won't that be fun?" Alan calmly reached behind his back and drew a gun he had hidden at his waist. He held it firmly with both hands, just as he had likely been taught years ago. The smirk disappeared from the man's face when he saw the weapon aimed directly at him. "Well, looks like the little boy has finally grown up," the man sneered. "What are you gonna do? Shoot me?" He laughed, and the woman joined in. "This ends now," Alan said with cold determination. And yes, I'm going to blow your brains out. The man spread his arms mockingly. Guess I'd better get ready to meet my maker, he said sarcastically. Shut up and don't move, Alan ordered, cocking the gun. His voice left no room for doubt, and the man's expression shifted to one of genuine fear. Even the woman's tone changed. Alan, please don't do anything rash, she pleaded. Look, you don't have to watch us. Just leave. We'll still have our fun without you. It won't be the same, but we'll manage. Shut up, woman, Alan snapped, his focus unwavering. Alan turned his cold stare toward Maggie. I'll deal with you next, he said firmly. Her eyes widened in shock. She had never heard him speak to her this way before. Alan, please, we don't need to resort to violence, she stammered. This isn't necessary. You're not really going to shoot anyone, the once smirking man said, now visibly uneasy. Oh, so now it's please, is it? Alan mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. That's the problem with scumbags like you. You think you can stroll into another man's life, steal his wife, strip him of his dignity, and expect him to talk it out like a gentleman. People like you mistake patience for weakness, and you grow cocky. Well, guess what? Tonight, you're going to face the music. You humiliated me, stole my manhood, and tonight, I'm taking it all back. Yes, you're going to die. Alan, please, don't do this, the man begged, his gaze flicking nervously to the gun. We can end this right now. Spare me, and I promise I'll never bother you again. Alan smeared at him. Oh, would you beg for mercy if the roles were reversed? He asked, his tone ice cold. The man dropped to his knees, hands raised in surrender. Please, Alan, spare me. I'll leave. You'll never see me again, he pleaded desperately. Alan turned his attention to Maggie. Look at him now. Maggie, your lover is on his knees, begging for his life. How does it feel, huh? Not so cocky anymore, is he? He shifted his focus back to the man. So, what do you think, Mags? Should I let him live? No? I don't think so. Goodbye, dirtbag! Should I let him live? Goodbye, Satan. You're destroyed. Your ankle just got like a second waiter's pants on. Before the man could react, Alan pulled the trigger. The bullet struck him squarely between the eyes, shattering his skull and spilling part of his brain onto the ground. His body fell backward with a sickening thud, blood pooling rapidly beneath him. Maggie let out a piercing scream, covering her ears as if to block out reality. Shut up, Alan yelled, turning the gun on her. Just shut the hell up. Maggie stopped screaming, but tears streamed down her face, leaving streaks in her smeared makeup. You killed him, she sobbed. Yes, I did, Alan replied coldly. But you and your lover killed me 2 years ago, and every day since, you've been stabbing me in the heart. So I guess we're even. Now it's your turn to feel pain. Please, Alan, don't kill me, she begged, trembling. I'm sorry for what I did to you. No, Maggie, Alan said with a twisted smile. You're not sorry, not even a little. And don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. Not that I haven't thought about it. Oh, trust me, I've considered it 100 times over. But death would be too easy for you. No, I want you to live. Live to be 100 years old, and I want every single day to remind you of what you've done. You're responsible for the deaths of 2 men, your lover and the man who loved you unconditionally for 17 years.